Now, this might seem like a really weird idea for a video, and to explain it properly, I need to introduce the economy of scale. You might think to yourself, but hold on, the Casio F91W is a really affordable, reliable watch with an iconic design. Why would you ever worry about its price? In truth, you probably wouldn't. Mine cost me just over $15 including shipping, though I'm sure it's possible to get them cheaper. To properly explain the premise of this video, we need to look at its competition, essentially an unbranded clone. Some context is required here to properly establish what I'm getting at. The recommended retail price of the most basic Royal Oak model from AP is somewhere between $16,000 and $20,000. Good luck buying it at that cost though. By comparison, you can get a 12 from Christopher Ward for around $1,300 on a bracelet. Economically speaking, the 12 looks like a bargain, and that's one of its appeals. That begs the question, just how cheap does this Casio clone have to be for it to warrant the time of day, if the real thing is so inexpensive to begin with? Well, I paid 76 cents for mine, including shipping. So the answer is pretty damn cheap. I'll be blunt though, while the premise of this video is comparing the two watches to see how they hold up against each other in competition, I want to be crystal clear. I would never recommend getting a cloned watch like this. And really, it was so cheap, I just wanted to see exactly how bad it was. So please treat this video as a tongue-in-cheek research piece rather than anything particularly serious. Having said that, one thing that actually did stun me is that I ordered both these watches within 5 minutes of each other. The Casio from Amazon UK and the clone from AliExpress. And the clone actually arrived first. I have no idea how that happens. I can only assume that they already had some stock in the UK for whatever reason, but fair play to them on this and credit where it's due. However, from this point on, the comparison between the two starts to get pretty shaky for the clone. Sometimes I will see products manufactured in the Far East advertised in ways that can be misleading to say the least. One common line rolled out is that big brand products are often manufactured out there for the cheaper labour and production costs, but those same factories make identical unbranded versions that you can buy for considerably less. I'll be honest, I have no idea how true that is. All I can speak to is that this clone is tangibly worse than the F91W in almost every imaginable way. I'll start with the most pressing concern. It doesn't actually keep accurate time. When we talk about quartz watches, there is an acceptance that they are going to be more accurate than mechanical or automatic movements, and often by a considerable margin. Most quartz watches will be more accurate over a month or a year than a mechanical watch will manage across a single day. The Casio F91W has a promised accuracy of plus or minus 30 seconds a month, which is not too bad given its extremely low price point. Now, obviously there is room for human error, but to the best of my ability, I started the prep for filming this video by setting these watches to the exact same time. The footage you're seeing is not in any chronological order, but over the space of 2 days, I noticed that the clone was getting further and further out of sync. By the end of the first day of wear, it had deviated from the F91W by over 5 seconds. At the start of the second day, I synced the two as closely as I could to the time.is website. It won't come as much surprise to you to find that it was the Casio running accurately and the clone running fast. Let that just be a simple lesson. Not all quartz is created equally, and just because a watch has a quartz movement in it does not immediately mean that it's accurately telling the time. The second biggest concern I had with the watch was legibility. I'm sure you can see from the side-by-side shots of the two watches, but from almost any angle, it's far easier to tell the time on the F91W. This is because the LCD screen on the Casio is quite clearly higher quality and has been designed with a wider range of viewing angles in mind. Not only that, but I think it's fairly safe to assume that Casio's manufacturing and build quality standards are going to be substantially higher than a watch that doesn't even bear a brand name on it. In all honesty, either of these issues should already be enough to put anyone off the idea of buying an unbranded digital clone model, if you ever thought to do so in the first place. Not only is it hard to tell the time, but it isn't accurate anyway. Something else that I noticed was that while the dimensions are near as makes no difference the same for the two models, the wearing experience is not. As far as I'm aware, I am allergic to two things: animal hair and alcohol. As you can imagine, these are not the best things that you could be allergic to, but I would also argue that there are far worse allergies you could have. I had no issues at all wearing the Casio, but I did notice that there was some redness to my wrist after wearing the clone for a prolonged period of time. This wasn't anything major, and I just thought it was likely down to wearing it a little too tight. But I realised this didn't make much sense, as the sizing is no different to the F91W. I can only imagine that the quality of the resin used on the strap is not as good, or the chemicals with which it's been treated have different additives or simply impurities in it that cause irritation. So we can add concerning to wear as another accolade to the clone at this point. Now, on the surface, the functionality of both watches is the same. The buttons do the exact same thing at the very least. You get a stopwatch, can set alarms, there's calendar functionality, and so on. To be brutally honest though, at this point I gave up on the idea of properly testing any of this, as the clone doesn't tell the time accurately, so my expectations of its other functionality were pretty much non-existent. When it comes to functions, the Achilles heel of the F91W has always been its laughable backlighting. Well, that may be true, but one thing is for sure, it still easily outclasses its clone compatriot in this regard. On a more superficial level, the colours are a little less subtle on the clone, and the beeping from the buttons a little louder. When you actually look at the wide range of issues I've raised here, and think back to what I said about the economy of scale, yes, you could buy almost 20 of these clones for the price of one F91W, but I think you would be absolutely mad to do so. One side note here is that a lot of you watching probably have some form of personal experience with the F91W. It's been in production since 1989 and has long been a popular choice for parents buying inexpensive timepieces for their children. There's a good chance that at least a few of you watching will have learnt how to tell the time on a digital display as a result of this exact watch. Clearly, a clone is no substitute whatsoever for that kind of nostalgia. The thing I really respect about the F91W in this regard is the fact that it isn't a reissue, reimagining, or spin on an old design. It's still very close to the 1989 original, with a few upgrades and modernisations across the years. It's effectively a case of, if it's not broke, don't fix it. I purchased both of these watches for the sake of making this video, but while the clone has already been donated to a charity shop, I did think about throwing it away given how awful it is, but that just felt wrong. In contrast, the F91W has earned itself a place in my personal collection. I think the biggest takeaway from this video for me is that actually when it comes to buying watches, you should use the Casio F91W as a benchmark. As a simple rule to follow, I would suggest that if a watch is available for less than the cost of the Casio, just don't. The chances that you're going to find something more iconic, affordable, accurate, and with a respectable level of build quality and durability is just extremely unlikely. Having said that, I would love to hear some counter discussion to that point in the comments. Is there anything else out there that could possibly compete as the very cheapest watch you should consider actually purchasing? While the F91W is not what I personally learnt to tell the time with, I'd be curious to hear those kind of stories from you too, whether it's with this model or something else. I know the video was titled "Which Watch Wins?", but I think you already knew the answer before you even clicked on it. I can only apologise to Casio for even putting these two watches side by side. As ever, thank you for your time. If you've enjoyed what you've seen or found it informative, consider dropping the video a like and subscribing for more content like this.